Welcome to the Hourly Podcast. In today's episode, Jason Brooks, Chief Operating Officer of Artistry Restaurants, shares his journey from starting as a busser to leading a growing restaurant organization. He emphasizes the importance of culture, training, and communication within the industry, and discusses the challenges and rewards of leadership. Jason advocates for authentic recognition of employees and the need for effective training programs to foster growth and retention in a high turnover industry. Enjoy.
This episode is brought to you by JoJo, an AI virtual recruiter powered by Sprockets. Designed for the hourly workforce, JoJo works 24/7 to source, screen, and schedule interviews with the best applicants for your business. JoJo helps reduce employee turnover and time spent hiring so you and your team can focus on other important tasks. To learn more, head to sprockets.ai/JoJo.
Jason, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. How is everything?
It's going great, AJ. How are you?
I am great. Tell us a little bit about you, the company you represent and work for.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. My name is Jason Brooks. I've spent most of my life in the restaurant business. Started as a young man, as a busser, actually, at Chili's, and then started waiting tables and cooking at Outback Steakhouse, and worked my way up the ladder through management. And today I am the Chief Operating Officer of Artistry Restaurants. Artistry is based in Winter Park, Florida. We have 5 restaurant brands and growing. We're developing a 6th and in the process of acquiring a 7th. And so it's a great organization that cares a lot about its people and its culture, and I'm happy to be here to help with the growth.
Love it. And so across those 5 brands, how many locations are there?
We have 30, but we are very close to doubling in size with, new restaurants in development. We have a new concept in development, and then we're in the process of acquiring a 7th brand, and that'll actually take us to 60. So rapid growth phase around here.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And one thing that you touched on that, of course, we're passionate about here on the Hourly Podcast is the people side of things, right? You care a lot about culture, care a lot about people. And I always have a special respect for people who come from the industry, right? Where you didn't swoop in from an ivory tower. You got your hands dirty really quick and really early, right? Being a busser at Chili's and a cooks at others. Talk to me a little bit about why that's important to you. And, some of the things that you do at Artistry to kind of make sure that you're taking care of your people.
Yeah, so, obviously growing up through the ranks, it makes me have a tremendous amount of empathy and understanding for what people go through. And so, even part of management training at Outback Steakhouse was working in the dish pit. And, of course, you might not necessarily need a whole lot of training to work in the dish pit, but just to be back there for a night or 2 or 3 really makes you just respect even more the hard work that the dishwasher, just as an example, has to do. So, as someone who went from a server to ultimately the C-suite, I just am so blessed and, had some good training experiences and some not so good training experiences that makes me want to take on as really my, personal mission to just pay it forward and to create a better learning and training opportunity for people who are coming up within the ranks. I really don't know of a whole lot better industries than the restaurant business, where somebody can start out as an hourly cook or an hourly server and then work their way into the C-suite.
Right. Yeah, and we talk a lot about that in the book is, everyone, I think, in pop culture thinks, hey, if you graduate from high school, maybe you graduate from some college, if you join a restaurant, that's kind of bad, right? But some of the fastest ways to a 6-figure salary today are through restaurants. It's through some of these amazing brands because of people like you that saw kind of what it was like, invest in your people, and build tracks to really a great life within the restaurant space. So, talk to me a little bit about the training experiences. You said, hey, some are good, some are bad. What is the difference? Like, what makes a good training process? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, we've come a long ways in the restaurant industry with training and development. And unfortunately, I think in some ways the restaurant business has been a bit antiquated, and when I first went through training, it was kind of a sink or swim type of environment. You were thrown into the deep end of the water and, good luck and try to figure out how to swim. And that wasn't so easy. Honestly, you compensated for the lack of training with just, sheer willpower and hard work. And we all know in today's world, that's just not a, long-term recipe to success. Good old-fashioned hard work, I think, is important and will always be important. But especially in today's world, you got to work smarter, not harder. And, people really demand and should demand a better work-life balance than that. And so, as I went from single unit to multi-unit and then ultimately to vice president, there honestly wasn't a whole lot of, mentoring or training programs along the way. And so I kind of learned through the school of hard knocks and, bruised some elbows and bloodied some knees and just got back up on the bike and figured out how to pedal. But, that's really not fair to today's workforce. And so I've taken some of those difficulties and again, just really made it my purpose to create a better learning environment for those who do have the desire and interest to move to the next level.
Yeah, especially in restaurant space, QSR's particular, 144% annual turnover on average, average tenure of an entry level person being 56 days, right? Training is a mechanism that's not only good for the world, which I think you and I care about, but it's also good for business,
Yes.
right? Like it's when you have people that stay longer, it costs less in hiring and retention, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
so from your perspective, what are some of those sticky things that show your people that you care tactically, that you might be willing to kind of share with our audience that you've seen work and buck some of those trends that we're seeing?
Yeah, so one is just good old-fashioned communication. I think that's one thing that all employees want more of. They want to hear what's going on. They want to know what's happening in the future. And so,
Right.
we've got to take advantage of every single way that we can communicate with team members. And so for a general manager, that might be a bulletin board or a whiteboard and having a pre-shift huddle or an alley rally and talking to them about today's specials, but also, what's happening in the business and what's ahead. I've spent, years traveling restaurants and visiting with thousands of hourly team members. And I always do ask them, one, what do you really love about the job? But two, what's one thing we could do to make your job even better? And the number one most common answer they give me is communication.
Mm.
Now, when you start to scale, and when you start to grow, and honestly, when you start to elevate to above store level leadership, you have to look for different ways to communicate. So, digital communication, text message, apps, doing a video just like this and just really leveraging every single way that you can possibly communicate to your team members. The second thing I would say is just really making an authentic effort to recognize people who are doing it right.
Mm.
It's very easy, and some managers find it, quite quick to point out all the things that are happening wrong. And we've got to coach those opportunities, but we can't forget the power of praise and the importance of recognizing people when they do it right. But it's got to be authentic, so I think you have to be a little bit careful not to be over programmatic with your recognition and with your culture. It can't just be a poster on the wall. It
Yeah.
can't just be an employee of the month program. It's got to really be heartfelt, authentic recognition.
And how do you train that across the GMs, right? So like, you talked about it a little bit, is scaling process, everything gets more difficult, right? Especially when it comes to people practices, because people are imperfect and you can't have a machine, right? And when you're scaling your GMs, the wider you get, the less control you inherently have over each of them individually. And
Yeah,
GM,
100%.
yeah, and
Go
GMs
ahead.
have such a power and influence over the culture of each individual restaurant. They become, in a lot of ways, like the culture champion, right? And I talk about this with large franchisors of what is the culture of big brand X, and they're like, it's the culture of the franchisee and the operator or the general manager inside the store. How do you think of that? Like, how
Yeah.
do you run it and how do you optimize, especially as you're going from 30 locations to 60 locations?
Yeah, and you're totally right. It's one thing to maybe have a great culture at the office or the headquarters or we call it the restaurant support center, but to truly make sure that it's permeated down to the dishwasher that I talked about earlier, I really think you gotta live it, and you gotta live it every day. One thing, you can't just stay in the office. There's obviously important things that happen in the office, and there's a reason to have meetings, but I love to get out in the field and really, show them that, we're not just sitting in an office coming up with recognition programs, but we're actually out in the field authentically recognizing team members who do it right. But
Yep.
I think the most important thing with general managers is to really lead by example. And so even just this past week at our Artistry Restaurant Support Center, we hosted our brand leaders and we had them come in and we talked about our culture and our purpose and our values. But to start, we brought the brand leaders up to the front of the stage and we just honored them and we thanked them and we recognized that as a support center, we wouldn't be in existence if it wasn't for the hard work of the team in the field. And so I think you just got to lead by example, and it does have to start with the top and bubble its way down. But you got to make sure that those, there's not subcultures of subcultures of subcultures out there. And that's why it's so critical to make sure that you're spending proper time getting out into the field and doing it alongside the team members.
Yeah, I love that. And, we had somebody that came on and they defined culture as culture is the worst behavior that you as a company are able to tolerate.
That's right.
So if
Yeah.
you
And
do something in a
yeah,
restaurant and it's wrong and you don't say something, that is your culture. But if you say something, that's also your culture. And so this person had a perspective that was awesome. It was like, if you train on what's tolerable or what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, that's a good framework to build an entire culture because everything else
yes.
derives from that.
Yeah, and honestly, when you think about like the future of the workforce, being part of a values-based organization where they have purpose, I think is becoming more and more important.
Right.
But people will smell out a hypocrite real quickly. So it's not just recognizing people who do it right, hiring people to the values and promoting those who live out the values well. But you oftentimes have to make the tough decision to remove someone who might be anti-cultural.
Right. And that's not always an easy decision.
No,
Right.
it's not. Yeah,
Especially if it's a high performing restaurant. They've hit their number for the last 8 quarters, but you see something that makes you uncomfortable. Right.
that's right.
But that's what great leaders do, right? They make hard decisions for the betterment of the org.
Yeah, and that's the key, I think, and I've had to do it. I've actually had to do it very recently, and it was hard. I have a tremendous amount of empathy, for those individuals, but it does take courage and strength to be a leader, and what might be difficult to do with one person might actually make it better for the other hundreds and thousands of people in the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like when you get up to your meeting, because how many people do you employ?
We have about 1,200 team members.
1,200. So
Yeah.
like, my, one of my mentors once told me is you should start every single meeting with, especially the difficult ones, with, okay, guys, we're going to make some hard decisions, but there's 1,200 families relying on us right now.
That's
To
right.
make these decisions, right? And that's the burden of restaurant leadership and burden of being a GM and the burden of responsibility, right? But that's showbiz, right?
Yeah, that's right. And if it was easy, everybody would do it, right?
Yeah, totally get it. Totally get it. But okay, we are coming up on time. I feel like we could do 6 of these. So maybe we will. We'll start a whole series on them. But I ask every single person the same question to end the presentation. you've kind of disclosed it already, but I'll ask it again just for podcast sake. Is what was your first hourly job, and were you fired from that job, or did you leave gracefully?
That's a good question. I mean, my first hourly job, I think I was like a plumber's assistant. And when I was 15, I'm not so sure I left gracefully, but it was a summer job. And, but my first kind of real job was waiting tables and cooking at Outback Steakhouse. And that's where I did fall in love with the restaurant business. And I left 25 years later as the vice president of operations for the Southern U.S. So I think it turned out pretty well.
Yeah, see, but given knowing and learning from you today, I'm sure if you followed the plumber track, you would have been wildly successful there.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not so sure, but
But if somebody wants to learn more about artistry, best way to do that.
Yeah, well, you can always follow me on LinkedIn, just Jason Brooks. But, we also have an Artistry Restaurants handle, or you can check out our website. It's www.artistryrestaurants.com.
Awesome. Well, Jason, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate it, AJ.